Hello, everybody, all at once. This is Theo Cedar Jones, here with a concluding episode of You Sleeping Fans of Rock, the death, decline, destruction, and resurrection of rock and roll. And I've given you my diagnosis of the problems in rock and how it got to the condition that it's in today. And now I'm going to offer you my solution, or how to fix rock. Well, you can't fix rock without really getting a whole new civilization. And that new civilization is emerging. And what it will look like is a balance between the divine feminine and the divine masculine. And instead of having a patriarchal style of culture where God is only a male, God is not a female, and only men can get enlightened and women can't. That's at the root of the ills in our society, is the idea that the divine is only masculine and that women cannot get enlightened. So what does this have to do with rock and roll? Basically, rock and roll is the emblem of a goddess culture that is in balance with the God culture. And I now see it is possible for this to occur because as of about a year ago, Santosha Tantra agreed to be in the Free Union of Renunciate Messengers in partnership with Adida Samraj, and essentially inhabit the position of the sacred, divine, feminine authority on planet Earth for now and forevermore. And that the great rebalancing of God and Goddess has happened between Adida and Santosha Tantra. And that this union, this rebalancing, this harmony between the divine sacred and the divine masculine is what will enable rock and roll to finally exist in a healthy way. We need a functioning goddess-positive culture for rock and roll to make sense, for it to be truly accepted, truly integrated into society in the proper way. So how to fix rock? We need to allow civilization to go through its greatest transformation from an ego-based civilization to an ego-less civilization. And this is the concomitant to having this rebalancing of the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine through Adida and Santosha Tantra. And they, Adida and Santosha Tantra, will become the sacred, cultural, and spiritual authority for all beings on planet Earth for all time, replacing the fake cultural authority of the three Abrahamic religions and the military-industrial complex and all the isms of the fake postmodernism, Marxism, feminism, fake environmentalism, fake leftism, all of these tribalizations of the human family into fractions and factions of itself is being dissolved by this rebalancing of the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine in Adida and Santosha Tantra. And this was what will and is enabling rock and roll to recover, rock and roll to have its proper context and support. So one of the clear signs that we are gaining a balanced culture is that we are going to restore nightlife. And part of this is restoring appropriate transit at night. In the Bay Area, that means the BART trains have to run at least once an hour, all night long, on Friday night and Saturday night, at least. And we need all ages clubs, and this is the thing I'm going to bring home again and again. All ages clubs are at the heart of the restoration of rock and roll, because that brings the youth culture economy back together with the rock and roll economy and makes it sustainable into the future. But all ages clubs also expunge the presence of alcohol from our nightlife, which is an absolutely essential step that we must take to restore nightlife, is getting rid of alcohol sales. Yeah, people can bring their own booze, they can get drunk, they can get high, they can have all kinds of drugs that they want, and we're going to legalize drugs and end the drug war. However, we're not going to make alcohol a part of the business model of the rock and roll industry anywhere at all, ever again. So get ready. Alcohol's getting out of the rock and roll business. So we got to fix the transit system for our nightlife to be restored. We've got to get alcohol out of the system. And then we need a special festival, which I'm thinking of calling the Moonshine Parade, which happens on a full moon night in summertime in the city of Oakland and other cities around the world. And basically people stay up all night and party all night, and they have block parties, and there's music in the streets, and everybody brings out their crafts and their wares to give, to sell, to gift. And there's nudity, and there's drug taking, and there's a managed form of revelry that takes place all night long, but is meant to instill our respect and appreciation for nightlife as one half of our cultural existence. And therefore, we need both our nightlife and our day culture to be in balance in order for that great bird of culture to fly. And the restored nightlife I envision is happening within a larger plan and scheme, which I call Bright Oakland. Because for us to really gain a culture that reflects the balance between the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine, we need to overhaul the entire economic topography of Oakland and every city in the world to phase out the brutalism and to phase in a rock-positive commons. And that means we need to explicitly, definitively, and decisively reintroduce rock space into the commons. And that means there are mini stages in every BART station where musicians can busk. There are larger, well-equipped stages in the BART's commons for full bands to play. There are free advertisements, billboards for local bands on billboards over the freeway and billboards inside the BART station. There are kiosks for band posters all over town. Rock space is instituted in the commons everywhere throughout Oakland. In addition, rock bands are given sustainable bionomies to live in. Rock bands will be at the forefront of being living demonstrations of how to live in an ark habitat, so that bands will enjoy the freedom from marketplace hegemony and dependence on far-flung systems for our food, shelter, water, energy, waste treatment, and warmth. All these things can be provided by ark habitats within the system of sustainable bionomies, and we need a cluster of these in Oakland for rock bands to live in. And then part of the Bright Oakland plan, which is beyond the scope of this video, but I just wanted to mention, is to tear out the dead zones in Oakland and revitalize them with, of course, you guessed it, rock music. And the dead zones include the Port of Oakland, Mills College, the city of Piedmont, and the Catholic Church and the Freemasonic Temple. All these need to be torn out and replaced with rock and roll infrastructure. Now, I'm not saying tear down all of the city of Piedmont, but the core of the city of Piedmont is a cultural dead zone, and it needs to have an all-ages rock club and cultural amenities. So, next part of the plan, how do we fix rock? I'm proposing that we take $1 trillion and dedicate it to arts and culture in the United States. If we truly want to make America great again, we must invest in a vast infrastructural overhaul, far beyond even the Marshall Plan or the D-Day invasion. We are going to take $1 trillion and build one all-ages club for every 50,000 people in every city in the Union. In addition to that, we're going to build all the necessary rock infrastructure to create vital local rock and roll scenes in every city. So that means, in addition to an all-ages club for every 50,000 residents, we will also have cooperatively owned radio stations for local bands, cooperatively owned record labels for local bands, and cooperatively owned local press to keep the public well aware of the activities, exploits, and achievements of local bands. This is the rock infrastructure that must be regenerated by design, not just leave it up to the so-called free market, which has totally let rock music down. And have all of this money, this redevelopment of infrastructure administered by the Global Cooperative Forum and other stakeholders that have a direct interest in the outcomes. But there has to be that global cooperative cultural element to deal with such large projects and large amounts of money in a transparent and accountable way, and to reach clearly defined goals. Like I said, one all-ages club for every 50,000 residents, and all the surrounding and supportive rock and roll infrastructure to make thriving, burgeoning rock scenes in every city of the Union. Another element of fixing rock and roll is the Playland phone app. The Playland phone app is a show finder, gig finder, band finder that enables audiences to find local shows of rock bands, local bands in their area. It enables venues and clubs to find bands to fill their calendar. And it enables bands to find gigs in a really automated, easy way that cuts out the need for booking agents, managers, or any kind of middleman, because the phone app mediates all the needs and interests of the local music economy. So if a club needs a band, they use the Playland app. If a band needs a gig, they use the Playland app. If an audience member needs to find a show to go to that night, they use the Playland app. It's the one-stop shop for everything to do with local bands. And this phone app will help to revitalize the local rock music culture in every city of the Union. The next element of how to fix rock and roll is the germ. Underneath the cultural authority of the firm, the Free Union of Renunciate Messengers, wherein Adidas Samraj and Santosha Tantra exert their cultural and spiritual authority, there is the germ, or the global union of rock musicians. We need to organize all musicians and bands in the world who are willing, so that they can gain the power of solidarity to improve their condition of their careers and their lives. The germ will have responsibility to make certain changes happen in the interests of rock bands. For example, the germ will help to create a band-positive new social media platform to replace the evil YouTube, Google, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram cabal with a completely rock band friendly social media platform that is built around the needs of bands, about how to bring fans and bands together and how to get money in the pockets of the songwriters, the musicians, and the bands. So a band-positive social media platform must be built, and the germ will help lead that. We need band and songwriter-owned digital download service online to replace iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, Amazon, and these other corrupt, evil cabal-based social media giants that have gutted, eviscerated, destroyed, and ruthlessly disempowered musicians and bands and the entire rock industry. With this band-owned digital download service, people will be able to know that every penny that they pay for these downloads goes to either the bands and the musicians or to pay for the overhead of that piece of infrastructure, but nothing to profit, nothing to shareholders, nothing to these asset-stripping, parasitic European royal families, secret societies, Freemasons. No. Every cent is accounted for, none of it is asset stripped, and the entire system is based on money, prosperity for bands and rock musicians. So, in addition, the germ is going to be responsible for specific outreach to underserved constituencies in America, specifically building out rock infrastructure on any and all Indian reservations and in the inner city of every most despoiled and underserved inner city section of America. And of course, the germ and the Global Cooperative Forum will help to administer a new system of grants for rock bands, foundation money and support for rock bands, endowment support and financing for rock bands, corporate support and financing for rock bands, private support and financing for rock bands, and a place where people can leave their estates when they die so that that money can be paid forward to the needs of rock bands. Another item to fix rock and roll is that we need the cooperation of the manufacturers of light electric vehicles and Uber and Lyft. Right now, Uber and Lyft is entirely corrupted by their being bought out by the internal combustion auto manufacturers, and they don't feature any light electric vehicles driven by their drivers. That must change. Uber and Lyft must use light electric vehicles and have products and services geared towards rock bands so that the vehicles themselves are designed to transport musicians and bands, and these vehicles are designed to transport their equipment safely and also to keep it secure so it is harder to steal. So Uber and Lyft needs to create dedicated, customized services for rock musicians and bands so that their travel needs are anticipated and their equipment transport needs are managed properly. Another item that will be necessary to create security for rock bands and artists is a living wage for artists and musicians. A living wage is part of my larger plan for society, but it certainly applies to rock bands, artists, and musicians first and foremost. No constituency in society has contributed more while being more ripped off. Therefore, there's no constituency more deserving of a living wage. And I guarantee you, for society to invest a living wage in artists and musicians will result in enormous dividends to society. Because artists and musicians, in their success and their achievement in writing songs and creating beautiful rock and roll live shows and beautiful cultural legacies of lifelong affinity and loyalty to fans. They will pay forward their achievements back into society, back into the economy, and back to future generations of bands. So a living wage is an investment that pays dividends that bands and artists pay forward to future generations. Next item, we need to institute the correct monitoring technology so musicians who perform on stage, rock bands, can hear themselves. And this means every musician has a personal, small, digital mixing board according to the design that I've specified, basically where the microphone inputs have a splitter that split each mic input to an XLR output that goes directly to the house. So this board will effectively split all mic signals so that one set of signals can go to the musician and another set can go to the house. In addition, the mixing board has built-in effects of compression, reverb, and delay. It has 2 headphone outputs, and it has a USB recording output to your computer or phone or device. This is the formula for musicians and bands to be able to hear themselves on stage. And this is essential for the success of rock and roll. Next item, the Rock Academy must be established all throughout America and have a rock and roll curriculum and a teacher training program so that we can train bands and musicians how to be teachers of rock music and have a wonderful and successful curriculum that could be applied worldwide to train new generations of rock musicians. The next item we will need to fix rock and roll is to end the drug war. We need to legalize marijuana and all psychedelic drugs because they have always been comfort, inspiration, and motivation to the artist. We must also legalize prostitution because there's always been a natural affinity between rock musicians and strippers and prostitutes, and we must stand in solidarity with the sex workers as rock bands and throw off the evil cabal's attempts to control our consenting adult behaviors and our consenting adult financial transactions. Next item is we must create a culture and even a worldwide organization of sovereign youth. Youth culture is the heart of rock and roll. It is the future of rock and roll, and it is the only hope of rock and roll. Rock must be part of a sovereign youth culture that recognizes the rights of youth, that youth are not lacking in the abilities of consent merely because they're younger than the age of 18 or 16. We must acknowledge the power of youth to make their own decisions, to protect themselves from predatory pedophiles by banding together and having youth organizations that do what adults have failed or have refused to do, which is to make sure that every child is protected. Next, we have to outline the correct role for conservatives in the culture of rock music. In the past, conservatives have essentially abandoned their role as protectors of traditions and cultures of our country when it comes to rock and roll and the blues and the so-called devil's music. This culture war between Christianity and rock and roll has got to end. Rock and roll is not the devil's music. Rock and roll was co-opted by the devil, by the bloodline families, by the secret Satanist societies. But in and of itself, rock is not satanic. Rock is of the goddess. God and the goddess in harmony. So conservatives from now on have to recognize that it's not enough to fulfill your role in securing our borders, having a strong military, being a well-armed citizenry, and protecting our Constitution. You have a larger role than that, because America is unique in that our military does not serve a king or the president or a tribe or a royal family. Our military is there to serve the people of the country and our Constitution. And when you do that, you protect not only the security of our country and our ability to survive as conservatives, which you're supposed to do, you conserve America's unique productive capacity for cultural innovation. And when you have a society based on liberty and the pursuit of happiness and freedom, what does that freedom get you? What does freedom look like? It looks like joy, the very feeling of being happy and free, and it means that rock bands are protected, that the ability of songwriters and cultural originators and influencers and innovators, namely rock stars, songwriters, musicians, performers, performance artists, and bands, are protected by you, the conservatives, are given our space through the living wage, through sustainable bionomies, through a well-supported rock and roll infrastructure, through the ending of alcohol in the clubs, through a corrected transit system, through giving jobs, teaching jobs to musicians, by reinstituting a rock and roll curriculum in every public school in the country. Every college and university must have rock space, must have rehearsal rooms, rock and roll drum kits, electronic PA, electronic amplifiers, guitars, bass, keyboards. Every kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade, ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade has rock and roll rehearsal rooms, rock and roll teachers, rock and roll curriculum, rock and roll history, and a rock positive culture in every sector of our society. Without fail and with prejudice, we are re-injecting our rock culture into every facet of society to replace this false consumerism, this evil Illuminati Satanism, this bullshit secret society crapola, these fake, phony religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, which are, of course, satanic pedophile cults in the guise of God-loving religions. Rock is here to replace all that. So you conservatives have to stop acting like Philistines. Stop acting uncultured. Stop acting ignorant of art history and the importance of rock and roll to you and our culture and our country. And start defending it. Start loving it. Start protecting it like a good conservative should. Think of rock bands as your children. Think of rock songs as the gold in the vaults in your treasury. And protect them with your life. That's the correct role of a conservative. We need to clean out all these Illuminati and satanic influences in rock music. It is time for rock bands and artists to simply say no. No more skulls. No more skull imagery in rock music. No more daggers through hearts and that sort of imagery in rock. No more crucified Christs. Anywhere. In religion or rock. No more thugs or pirates. No more of that kind of basically Illuminati degraded imagery that glorifies thieves, murderers, thugs and pirates. We need to question that imagery in rock. We need to get over it. And to fix rock, we need the GERM, the Global Union of Rock Musicians, to lawyer up. We need to protect bands legally. We need to make sure not one single band on this planet is financially exploited by unfair contracts or agreements, that bands are given free access to legal education, legal counsel, and certain of the most grievous and onerous and unresolved legal assaults against bands in the past, financial assaults, taxation assaults, drug crime assaults against bands, need to be re-looked at and re-adjudicated. Things like John Fogerty losing $1 billion to Fantasy Records in that evil system in that contract. If that's true, we need to uncover all the details and the facts. We need to fix any things legally that can be fixed. We need to make fair anything that can be made fair. And open up old cases that need to be opened up, especially concerning the deaths of John Lennon, Bob Marley, Kurt Cobain, Chris Cornell, Chester Bennington, and others. Another item in saving rock and roll is we need to reevaluate the 1,000 greatest songs of all time. Up till now, the only serious effort made in this direction has been Rolling Stone magazine, which is the ultimate satanic asswipe sellout toilet paper. And they have made their 500 greatest songs, which is a grossly biased, imbalanced list, which denies the contributions of songwriters such as the Meat Puppets and the Minutemen and Steely Dan and Nine Inch Nails and the grunge bands of the 90s and Dinosaur Jr. and the Pixies and on, Soft Boys and Robin Hitchcock, grossly underrepresent many of the greatest songwriters of the last 60 years. So we need a new 1,000 greatest songs, because that is our aspirational focus, is to have new generations of bands and songwriters match the level of the 1,000 greatest songs and use that as their point of inspiration and aspiration. Next item in saving rock and roll, we need to redefine Hollywood's role. Unlike the Democratic Party, there is something worth saving about Hollywood. Hollywood has made some good art. Hollywood has made some serious and really good contributions to society. So let's save Hollywood from itself, from its gross, disgusting, satanic, evil, pedophile ways, from its hideous CIA, MK Ultra, Operation Mockingbird mind control ways, and retool Hollywood to be the engine of making media about rock bands. Hollywood has a bright future making biopics about virtually every rock band that's ever made any kind of reputation for itself, whether it's Jonathan Richman through the Cramps, through the television personalities, through, I'm saying British bands too. We need Hollywood to make biopics and semi-fictionalized movies and documentaries about every significant rock band that's ever existed. Secondly, Hollywood needs to make reality shows about contemporary struggling rock bands. Reality shows about real bands, right? Thirdly, Hollywood needs to make competition shows that are not just the star separated from the band, but the whole band competing against other whole bands in a competition show that is watched by millions or billions of people. Hollywood, your job is to make rock and roll great again, to make America great again through celebration of, the glorification of, the dispersion of rock and roll to the far corners of the world, especially Mongolia. So Hollywood, rock and roll is your content. Local bands is your content. The success and achievement of America through its rock bands is your duty. And finally, the last thing I want to offer to save rock and roll is my band, Swaybone. Right now, it's the world's first and only band that openly sings about God. Can you believe that? Not a Christian band, but a true grunge classic rock band that sings about Adi Das Samraj, Santosha Ma, enlightenment, transcending the ego, egolessness, and the problems of the ego. I'm the first one, and Swaybone is the first band to cover all the topics that will be germane and commonly dealt with in the new civilization. Swaybone is the soundtrack, is the rock and roll band of the new civilization, and we're meant to be the seed of hundreds and thousands of bands that will gradually acculturate to the teaching of Adida, that will gradually become more enlightened, that will gradually transcend their own egos and adopt and adapt a form of rock and roll that is compatible with transcending the ego, an egoless culture, a devotional culture towards the guru, a real living relationship with the presence of the divine. Swaybone leads the way and shows the way forward for rock bands in the future to write lyrics about God, about goddess, about enlightenment, about the ego, about consciousness itself. So that's my proposals for how to save rock and roll.